thank you first for joining us, Pierre. I'll give you the screen. You can introduce yourself and start with your topic that I'm looking forward to know more about it. Go ahead.
Very good. Thanks, Andre, and thank you everyone who's joined us. It's a nice opportunity, and it's definitely something that is a good way to end the year, is to start planning, like how can we improve and how can we self-develop going into 2021. The topic of my discussion today is about unconscious bias. It's a term that I have learned about late in my career. So I did first a few years in Lebanon, and then I left Lebanon, and then I worked in Dubai, I worked in Saudi and Bahrain, and then I moved to Ireland for a few years, and now I'm back to Dubai. Throughout my career working for a couple of international companies, you get to meet a lot of people from the different cultures, different countries, but also different personalities, different backgrounds. And this is where the opportunity becomes interesting, is to be able to see how people work and how they react, but also how does decision making happen and what can be done to be able to get insights out of these decisions, so you can basically be the most objective that you can be. Now, that's where I learned about the topic of unconscious bias, and I'm going to be sharing my screen. Andre, please tell me if you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can see it.
Very good. So the term of unconscious bias is something that really lives with a lot of people. It's basically all humans have unconscious bias. If we go back really to history, 100,000 years ago, we were as humans, fighting, let's say, in the plains of Africa with some very wild animals that could eat us. So a lot of decisions that we would make on a daily basis could be life or death decisions. And people didn't really have the luxury to be able to try to be objective. So let's say you're walking in a forest and then you see a creature coming near to you. You start assessing, okay, let me look at this creature. It's smaller than a giraffe. It's a little bit bigger than a fox. It looks a little bit brown. It has big teeth. Oh yeah, this is a bear. Oh yeah, maybe I should start running. At that stage, like if you take all that time, you probably end up being eaten by that wild animal, be it a bear or a lion. And this, unconscious bias is basically the natural reaction that can happen. It's the automatic reaction that someone can have. And it used to be there for a good reason, to protect us and to help with our survival. But then as humanity evolved, we now live in a different world, but our senses and our capturing of information has still stayed the same. And a lot of these unconscious biases, reactions are still there, and they naturally exist. So today's world, there is a lot more information. Obviously, it looks really different. And what we call safety is also different depending on where you live. Some people have like food as a safety. Some others have crossing the street as a safety. Some others are looking at different criteria. Now, if we look at the number of information that we receive every single moment, each one of us as human beings receive 11 million bits of information every moment, not per day, not per hour, not per minute. It's every moment we get this. Our brains can obviously not cope with all that information, so we end up creating naturally some filters and significant layers of filters to automate our responses. Why? Because we can only process 40 bits of information out of 11 million. So if we take that from a percentage perspective, it's 9.999996% of our decisions are being influenced by unconscious reactions to the information that we are receiving. And this is happening every single moment we are awake and we're engaging with others. So a lot of people try to be as objective as they can be, but it's really hard. And you talk to someone, Andre, I tried to find a picture that represents you the most, and I know it doesn't look very much the same, but I want to tell you something I haven't told you before. Andre, you are biased. And so am I, right? Every one of us is biased. And it's really important, it matters that we acknowledge that we are all biased. And it's important to learn about what biases there are and how are they impacting us, and what can we do to be able to address them and make sure that some of our decisions are driven with the most relevant information, not with the most automatic information that is coming through our brains. So every tiny bit of bias can have really big consequences. For example, we look at a corporation. Many companies, they have a certain system for seniority of people. So let's take entry level being level 1, very senior level, let's say director or VP being level 8. If we look at a perfect world and you would ask, how would you like the distribution of gender to be across all the seniority levels, you would expect in a just world to have 50-50% on both sides. So 50% to be male, 50% to be female. Now, this is only one example of how bias can influence us. If we take only a 1% variance at each level, starting with level 1 being the lowest, all the way up to level 8, a 1% variance at each level in terms of performance scores, and that is being driven by biases, that can lead to a really big impact at the higher levels. So this is one example of how people who are working in companies, and the companies are represented by the decisions those people are making, can end up having a very different outcome in terms of their representation. Now, why am I talking about representation of females and males? Because a lot of studies are showing unanimously that companies with higher proportions of women on the board of directors are outperforming other companies that have only males on the board of directors. Another thing is really about diversity. Diverse teams can bring a lot of different ideas and different perspectives, and they always outperform homogeneous teams and homogeneous ideas, especially when solving complex problems. So if we look at it from a business perspective, there is a business advantage in having diversity. How can we improve diversity? How can we improve equity in terms of not only male and female, but also racial, also background? All of these factors can contribute is by being able to identify some of the most common biases. Now, if I were to ask you a question like how many biases do you think there are, some people might say 5, 10, and we do that exercise. Usually this type of session takes 90 minutes, but here is 15 minutes. So really trying to summarize the high level information, and I will be sharing some additional details once we finish that Andre will be sending after the session. So there is more than 180 biases, and on one of the slides, I'll show you a summary of 188 biases that all of us are actually having them automatically downloaded since we are born, and then we go through them. But not all of us react to them in the same way. And this is what's important, is once you start learning about your biases and the ones that are common, you have biases that are common more than other ones. This is how it can help you make better decisions, be it in your personal life or in your professional life. So if we start looking at some examples, I have taken them from a website called yourbias.is. And also the next 3 slides have basically summary visuals from a website called Visual Capitalist. So I'll be taking you through them. So I'm not going to read through all the text. You will get access to this presentation afterwards. But let's take one bias called the halo effect. It's basically how much you like someone or how attracted you are to them can influence your judgment of them. So, if they make a mistake, if you don't like that person, you will assess that mistake as being way bigger than compared to another scenario where if they make a mistake and you do like that person or you're attracted to that person, you will tend to kind of reduce the impact of that mistake. Another thing is the in-group bias, is you unfairly favor those who belong to your group. And that could be your group of either male, female, even your group of people playing the same game, for example, basketball, or your group of people who like to go to the same restaurant or the same social circle. And so this is also something that happens. We all try to be as fair as possible, but there is the in-group bias that impacts a lot of us. We take the placebo effect, many of you may have heard about it, and it's something that is being used in pharma testing. Now, for example, with the COVID vaccines, you look at the details of how they are determining the efficacy of the vaccines, 90%, 94%, is by comparing the people who took the real vaccine and seeing their effect versus the people who took a placebo vaccine. And this is basically giving someone a medicine that is a fake medicine, but telling them that the medicine will actually help you and trying to see if the placebo will impact them. And a lot of science shows that placebo medicine is actually making an impact biologically and physiologically on individuals. Let's take a case where you have an emergency, you see something that happened in front of you, and there's always this first reaction called the bystander effect, meaning you don't tend to rush into helping someone because you presume that someone else is going to do something in an emergency situation. This is especially the case if there is a crowd next to you. Maybe if you're walking on the street and then you see someone fall off their bike, if you're the only person, a lot of us will tend to rush and help that person. But suddenly, if you're a group like of 2 or 3 people not really knowing each other, you will all stand there and look at each other, trying to hope that someone else will actually go and help that person. Moving on to another example is this one. I know it's very detailed, but this is the slide that I mentioned, which has all 188 biases that have been summarized in this infographic, and they're summarized into 4 categories. So one category is having too much information. We're all, in situations where we do have a lot of information, and then we need to be able to have a reaction to that information. And there's a lot of biases that are related to this category, and they are grouped by a reaction, and then they are grouped by the bias description, which you will be able to actually read in details. Not enough meaning is being able to see, like, how can you find some characteristics or stereotypes related to the history of your engagement with certain individuals. Needing to act fast is to be able to demonstrate that you're confident or that you are favoring like immediate reaction based on the information available to you. And what should we remember, because there's an overload of information, is how do you tend to discard some information and only keep the information that you believe is relevant for you, be it at work or in the personal space. So how can we take this forward is basically for 2021, the challenge for everyone is to be able to hold yourselves accountable. Try to question your first impressions. Try to justify your decisions by reflecting on them and by asking for feedback. Like, why did I react in a specific way towards a colleague at work or a person in my social circle? Why did I make a judgment about a certain topic without really having a lot of information about it? Everyone is expected, to be empowered to call out unconscious bias. This can only happen if you have the knowledge that there is this bias that is there. So once you are able to put a name on the bias, it means that you are able to identify it, and you will practice in being able to recognize it when it happens and decide if you want this to be impacting your decision making or not. When you master recognizing bias in yourself, you can start holding others accountable and basically sharing that information with them. So you can create a culture of sharing unconscious bias, which ultimately will help people in recognizing their decision processes and also recognizing what can they do to be more satisfied with the outcome of specific decisions and with the outcome of their relationships at work or in the personal space. So that's it for me. I believe I'm at 15 minutes. I'm going to try the camera again. Let's see if it works. And I'm happy to take any questions. Otherwise, I'll ask Andre to mention the question to me.
Thank you, Pierre. I had many comments from people like Ali saying, great topic, Pierre. Unconscious bias is a beast many corporates are dealing with and trying to tame. If you have any questions, everyone here, you can write them for Pierre. He can answer them now or later on in the chat box. Elisar Hajzawi sends you a lot of love.
Hi, Elisar.
And many people agreed on the points, saying thank you. Let me see if we have something else. Thumbs up. Perfect. Great session. Everyone enjoyed it. Let me see some thumbs up for Pierre. If you enjoyed the value of his topic. Sandrine saying nice topic and well tackled. Thank you, Pierre. I also actually I know the importance of the unconscious and subconscious also mind. That's why I try to take like 5 days retreat every 6 months, to be totally disconnected and let my subconscious mind give me more info of what I was suppressing from the interruptions, from distractions that I have in my life. And it's coming from both the unconscious and the subconscious mind. I can see many thumbs ups and many comments. Let me read them for you. So many thumbs up. Pascal, finally, we are considering unconscious bias in the business world. Jean-Paul, Pierre, it was amazing. Pauline, thank you, Pierre. We have Pierre with us. Hey, Pierre.
Finally, it's working.
Now you can see Pierre. You can meet Pierre. Thank you for joining us. I know you're joining.
There was someone who made a comment about unconscious bias being implemented in the workplace. There are many companies, especially in the tech world, like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, who are very focused on unconscious bias, and there's a training that is done for all employees and all managers about this topic. So part of the information that I'll be sharing in the follow-up is actually a training from Google and a slide deck from the other companies that show how we do the training of unconscious bias, and this can be replicated easily with all other business owners and all other employees with their managers and their teams.
Perfect, very valuable giveaway. Thank you, Pierre, and thank you, everyone.